Marketing. I'm delighted to welcome the tartan trainer, Stuart Harris, to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Stuart.
Hi there, Alec. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much. My goodness, there's a lot contained in that. But unfortunately for you, I'm going to take you on a journey, a mental journey back to your last year in school, just to see where you are mentally based and how are you prepared for the world.
I'd like to say that was only about 10 or 12 years ago. It was a lot longer than that, trust me.
Right.
Last year at school, I actually stayed on till sixth year.
All right.
And the reason being, not because I was particularly studious, is because I wasn't particularly studious. And I thought, I really need to stay on an extra couple of years to try and get another couple of O-levels and maybe go for a higher. And I just didn't really apply myself at school.
Right.
I would often challenge teachers when they say, today we're going to do trigonometry or we're going to do matriculation, particularly in maths or the soil in geography or whatever it might well have been. And as a cheeky wee sort of 16-year-old, cute as a button, I must add, my hand would go up and ask the teacher, why do I need to learn trigonometry? When am I ever going to use it later on in life?
Right.
Give me a reason. You're going to use this because if you're going to do X, Y, or Z, you'll need to be able to calculate that. And this gives you the tools to do it. But they didn't. They just said, because this is part of the course and you just need to learn it. So get your head down it and get on with your books. So I left there. And I thought I wanted to be a social worker or a hairdresser.
Why is that? Why?
Well, a hairdresser because my big cousin Linda was a hairdresser and she used to come round to my mum's house. And my grannies and my aunties would all come round. And I know, and it was, they had a fab time. They just hooted and hollered all the way through it. But at the end of the night, they would all pass Linda their 10 or 20 pounds, whatever it was. And I thought, that's easy money. I could do that. But it wasn't easy money. You know, it was a tough gig. So I thought I'll go for the easy option. I'll become a social worker.
Right.
And went around some colleges who told me, you don't have any experience. Go away for a couple of years, get some experience and come back. And then I went around a number of places in the care sector and said, can I get some experience with you if you get any jobs? And they said, unless you've got a qualification, you're not going to, we're not going to be able to use you, come back in a couple of years. So when I got home, got off the bus in my hometown and went in a hotel and said, have you got any jobs going? And I got a job straight away as a waiter. And then within a couple of days, I was identified as a general assistant. And I thought,
promotion, no less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it wasn't just an assistant, it was a general assistant, which I thought was my first step into the world of hotel management, but it wasn't. It was just a gopher. They should change it, so one day you're in the kitchen, the next day you're in reception, the next day you're in housekeeping, the next day you're in the bar, next day and it was a fantastic experience. But absolutely loved it. Loved particularly getting the showing off bits. Making cocktails, cooking at tables. I just loved all of that. You know, it was fantastic fun and a great crowd of people I worked with as well. So, and I started there, general assistant, moved around a couple of places and was in hotel and pub land for 16 years.
Well, okay. So, I mean, obviously the showing off bit, I understand. I've seen that we're both in the world of professional speaking, but tell me this, that's a tough world to be in. So obviously you had a good rapport with people.
Well, I think it's essential. At one stage, I was in the mid-80s, I was an assistant manager in a hotel in St Andrews. And the manager was leaving. He'd another position. He was going to move on somewhere else. And the owner of the hotel, who was a Scottish expat, who had a couple of Howard Johnsons out in Florida, he said, Stuart, I think you could step up. I think you could take the manager's role. But we've got a lot of American customers. We had a lot of people coming over from the States, Europe, Japan, for the golf. St Andrews, famous for. Particularly the Americans. He said, but I want you to see what American customers expect on their homeland And he said, because I think America's this, I say this back in the 80s, I don't know how much it's changed, but America's, as far as service delivery is concerned, America's 10 years ahead of London. London is 10 years ahead of the rest of the UK.
Right.
I want you to bring what you learn over there into the hotel in St Andrews, so that American customers go, don't usually get that. And it was minor things, you know, it was just simple things like carrying all the food out on a tray in a one go, rather than going backwards and forwards to the kitchen 4 or 5 times. It was a matter as soon as they sit down, you give them a jug of water and a couple of. Now, this isn't groundbreaking stuff, but I'm still a big fan of. It's the little things that make the big difference. And I still do, you know, when I'm doing customer service training, I'm always going back to see that wee thing about building rapport. That makes the big difference in what you're doing. So and somebody said, like, you know, how do you get from hotels to working in sales, to working in this, now speaking at conferences, running workshops? There's a thread all the way through it. You know, being a people person, understanding there's a way that I need to craft my content so that people understand it, and they will get the message, and more importantly, they will go and do what they've learned. So
I think you've identified a couple of very important things for our listeners there, most of whom are in business. For example, the importance of the small things, and then training people to a level to understand that they deliver that consistently.
Yeah, I totally. And a lot of times people look at the big things that they think is going to affect their customers. They're always striving for the next big thing. And there's a number of people that really go for, it's got to be first-class service on every single occasion. You've got to really push the boundaries. You've really got to dedicate the time and the efforts and the efficiency in what you actually do. Sometimes people just want the simple things. Just invoice me at the right time, charge me for the right amount of whatever I've used of product or service, be there at the end of the phone if I've got a problem and I need to. And sometimes people miss that because they're always looking for what is the next version.
Yeah, so as we know, people tend to grab a customer, give them some good service, and then forget about them as they go looking for the next new customer.
Yeah. And I do, not a lot, but I do some mystery shopping for clients. If I'm speaking to a new client and they say, can you come in and do some sales training for us? I do a lot of work with contact centers. And the first thing that I'll do, I'll phone the contact center and try and sound interested in buying their product. But I'm not an easy pushover. I want them to try and sell it to me. And I want them to are they asking me questions? What's important to me? And a lot of the time they're not. You know, they're missing a lot. So I'm trying to find out what's wrong. So when I go back to them, I say, okay, fine, this is where you are just now. This is what I'll do. And these are going to be the outcomes for it, these proposed outcomes. And I work very closely. And I use a technique, and anybody can do this in their own business, is a technique that I heard about years ago with recruitment. When people are recruiting or interviewing people, they might ask a question, tell me about a time when you worked with a team that was rather dysfunctional. Right. And people, often they'll just blurt out the first thing that comes to their head. These are questions that always come up in interviews. So if they can structure their answer using what's known as the STAR technique, what was the situation? What was the target? What was the action? And what were the results? So now when I'm dealing with clients, I find out, okay, fine, where are you now? What's the situation? And with contact centers, if it moves, you can measure it. If you can measure it, you can manage it. So it's a world of KPIs and 3-letter acronyms. And I hate people that use TLAs. But so I'll get the numbers first. Okay, fine. This is where you are. Where do you want to get to? In 6 months' time or 3 years' time, if we catch up for a coffee, you look back on what change took place. And then when I'm saying whether it's an interview for techniques, you know, what was the action? What did we do about it? And then the last one is results. So when I'm crafting a case study, what was the situation? What was the target? Where did they want to get to? What were the actions? What did I do? What was my involvement? And what were the results? What were the outcomes? Not just, you know, ticks along the excellent column on your happy sheet, but 3 months later, has there been an improvement in performance?
And I think that's a very valuable lesson for our listeners here. And if you're just joining us now, I'm speaking with the tartan trainer, Stuart Harris. So let me just continue on. So anyway, hospitality, where was your next port of call? Because you were going to spend 16 years in hospitality and then move on.
I moved mainly around England, different hotels in England. Constantly looking for opportunities. I'd go to somewhere, be the best that I could be, and then over a couple of years I go, okay, fine, it's now time for me to stretch myself again and look for other positions, the next step up, so I could learn, go to bigger and better hotels, 5-star hotels rather than 3-star hotels, whatever. But loved it. I really did love it. I preferred the doing more so than the managing.
Sure.
If you turn the clock back and said, okay, fine, how happy were you when you were 25 compared to how happy were you in that role when you were 30, getting out and doing there and meeting the customers rather than being in an office thinking strategically. And I think that's still the same, all the way through my career, it's still the get out and do it.
Yeah. Yes. So you got involved in the whole area of sales, but you were going to be motivated by training. Tell us a bit more about that and what sort of brought you into that.
I made the transition from hotels and basically because somebody came in to sell me advertising in a local free newspaper, the paper that comes through the door and goes, if it's lucky, it makes it to the cat tray, or more often it goes straight to the recycling bin. So I had to sell advertising for that. Tough gig. And there was no training took place. It was like, okay, fine, you're given a ruler. This is, here are the basics, spend half a day with Big Matt and he'll show you the ropes and then you're cut loose, and it's a high churn rate because people are not getting developed. And I moved from there to selling organic wine, of all things. And I was there for a while and I thought, no, I'm not getting very fast. Nobody's showing me the best way to do this. I wasn't a salesman. I didn't really consider myself as a salesman. But I just went in and tried to engage with people and win them over. And we did that, including selling organic wine to John Peel of all. He was one of my heroes, certainly.
He's one of mine too. So there we go.
Yeah. I was a lovely guy, lovely, him and his family. I think he used to call her the Beast.
All right.
I think that was his nickname for her on the radio. Yeah. Anyway, got that and then managed to get a position with Coca-Cola.
All right.
And had probably the best boss I've ever had, a guy called Robert Kelly. He's fantastic. I'm sure I'll come back to him later on. Really well supported, really well developed, a lot of direction, a lot of engagement in what I was actually going to be doing, and loved it. And I was there for 7 years. But I got to a stage where I was doing national accounts, but I was also being called upon by somebody new came into the organisation. Somebody new joined our team. It would get sent out with me for a couple of weeks and I'd train them up. Or even somebody who came in at a really senior level. In fact, on one occasion, we had a visit from a guy called Summerfield K. Johnson III. It might surprise you to know he came from America.
Really?
Yeah. But it's not a name you get around Glasgow. I've got to tell you that. So, and he was across and they wanted to go. Often these guys want to go out and see what it's like out in the real world. So I would take them out and I'd show them, this is what it's like in schools and this is what it's like in the big supermarkets. This is what it's like where they were selling in product or equipment. And it was just, I just love that idea. And I still say to people, if you're running business, spend some time with your people, not just having a meeting with them.
Sure.
But go out with them. And Robert, he would come out. I lived in Norwich, he lived in Great Yarmouth. And it was either a matter, I'm sure it was either a matter coming out with me, who was 20 minutes away, or going out with Big Andy, who lived in Daventry, at the other side of England, So I got the visits. But it's fantastic because you're always learning something, because you're always looking to improve in what you're doing. But that was certainly the same thing with Coca-Cola. They wanted to go out and see the tools that you're using. Wait a minute, why are you using that? That doesn't work. That's the tools that we've been given. And they'd go away and go, well, that's not helping our guys. It wasn't quite Gordon Ramsay's kitchen hell, but they wanted to know what it was like at the sharp end. And I still advocate that for all managers to just say, spend some time. When I worked in training in call centres, another cracking boss of mine, a guy called Graham Baker, he was the managing director. Every Friday afternoon, he would get us down into the boardroom, and it'd be the heads of departments. I was head of training and quality assurance. And he'd get us into the boardroom, and we are thinking, oh, God, it's Friday afternoon. I just want to go up the road and get a round of golf in before 4 o'clock. And often what he would do was a call centre, and what he would often do is, like, everyone would get a headset, and we'd go on to the different areas. We're an outsourced company, so we dealt with the call centre handling for a number of different clients. And we go, okay, fine, you go and sit beside the O2 guys, you go and sit beside the BMI baby guys, you go and sit beside whatever it would be, and listen into the calls, jack into their system, watch what's going on the screen, watch the tools that they're using, and come back and feedback. And we go back after an hour. And I was probably closer to the sharp end than a lot of people. The finance director or the IT director, people didn't know them. Sure. But they knew me because I was in training, and I got to meet everybody when they're starting new. And it was just amazing to come back and go, well, what did you find out? Well, they're doing this, and they've got to copy, and they've got to retype up things from there rather than trying. It was crazy. What a godsend it was to help solve problems, identify the problems and solve them, and what we could do. And that was good.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, if we look back on the thread so far, I mean, you were in school where you were being taught subjects that really were irrelevant without some, I suppose, relevance being put on them and how you might use those skills. And then to move through and find yourself working in places where there was no real training. You're thrown in at the deep end and expected to either sink or swim in it. And now you've found yourself in a position where you're now able to make yourself, the knowledge that you've got to help those in organizations. So there's a nice little thread running through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I again, a couple of guys that you know very well in the PSA, Professional Speaking Association, and I would class them as good friends as well. But I've sat in conversations that they've had, and I remember hearing it years ago, and I was thinking, I think I do that. I just didn't know it was called that. And again, they used another 3-letter acronym. And Alan would talk about, much as PSA stands for Professional Speaking Association, Alan would talk about when you're crafting a keynote speech, either make your point, tell a story to back up the point, and then tell the application. Sean was slightly round the other way. And I think you can do it both ways. I think you need to do it both ways. So he would tell a story, and Sean is a fantastic storyteller. He would tell a story, then make the point of the story. And then he would say, and how you would use this in your day-to-day business is X, Y, and Z. So it was story, point, application. I think I did it. I love as you probably already guessed, I love a story. Yeah. But what's the point of that? And how am I going to use trigonometry later on in life? So every time I do training workshops, there's usually an analogy or an anecdote which leads us into the topic. And then by the end of the topic, we're saying, okay, how do you think you can use that? Let's brainstorm this. Let's come up with some real life experiences. And it works. It works.
And if you're just joining us now, you meet my guest, tartan trainer, Stuart Harris. And we're talking about training, and my goodness, his life so far. So all this training, Coca-Cola, you were there for 7 years. But there was more to life than that. And you were going to head off and do other things.
Oh, I think there probably was, as you can probably see from my bookcase. A number of people have said, "Have you read all of those books?" I've read some of all of those books. I'm not a big reader. I'm a big watcher. I love YouTube. There's so much to learn from YouTube, and I create more YouTube videos now as well. But sometimes, like if I just picked one of those books off the shelf just now, I could probably go, I've read that chapter, and that chapter was important to me at that time. And I will go back and revisit different chapters, but I don't know if there's any of those books that I'll have written, started from page 1 and finished at page 642. A cherry pick.
Yeah,
with
did right.
what I
Life's
need at
too
the time.
short.
Yeah, and I think that's important in training as well. What a number of organisations do, they'll say we want to run a course and we want to put everybody through it, and it's called sheep dipping. Everybody goes through this, but you sort of go, well, I've got guys in the training, they're absolutely brilliant at this. I've had people coming in. I was doing some work for a client in Glasgow, funnily enough, and this guy came in late. He came strolling in about 10:30 or something like that. And as he's taking his seat, he didn't even look at me, but what time are we finishing today, big man? And I said, well, we're finishing at 5 o'clock. Now, I've already told the guys, let's keep lunch brief and we can get you away at 4:30 to beat the traffic. They love that. What time are we finishing? 5 o'clock as planned. Can we not finish early? Can we not hit it and quit? Any particular reason? Yeah, I'm going to see Celtic playing against Barcelona at Celtic Park tonight, as was I. And I thought, if I'm staying here, you're staying. And I said, no, we're finishing at that time. And he was in a huff. He didn't get involved at all. And at the break, it was a course in presentation skills. And at the break, I said, are you getting much from the... He wouldn't get involved. And he was just going to be a nightmare throughout the course. And I said, are you getting much from the course? No. Do you do presentation in your current role? No. Why are you here? He said, my boss told me how to do this course, to do a course, and this sounded less boring than anything else. And I was showered with praise, and I went, listen, if it's not relevant to you, do you want to stay or do you want to go? I felt like the clash. And he said, oh, just go then, that'll be absolutely fine. And he left. Of course, I'm straight on the phone to his boss, just to let you know, expect him back soon because he's not staying for the day. Yeah. And whether, I don't know if he did go back, I doubt it. But I just thought skill gaps need to be identified, I think, in individuals. So rather than going, okay, fine, we're going to do a sales course, everybody goes through it. Some people are already really good at sales and they're great at building rapport and asking the right questions and doing all the great stuff that you do in a sales call. Some people are really green behind the ears. And it's going to be hard to get the right fit for both different ends of the spectrum. So, so I work closely with a lot of clients about training needs analysis and what they need to do.
I suppose with the sort of 3.5 minutes we've got left, tell me more about what you're doing now and how that's relevant, particularly in the light of what's happened in terms of COVID over the last maybe nearly best part of 2 years.
Last year was a killer, for the training world. You weren't able to, stand up in front of a room of 15 people in a workshop.
And the show off that you weren't able to do that.
And the show off unless I got a big mirror at the end of the room, you've got nobody to deliver. But I looked at my business and I thought things will need to change. This isn't a short-term thing. And I reflected back on my boss, Robert, at Coca-Cola. And one of the things that he said in a coaching call, we'd been in to see a big client and we came back out and he said, what's your MLD?
Oh.
To which I, of course, replied, my what? And he said, okay, what went well there that you could have done more of?
Right.
What didn't go so well that you could have done less of? And if you had to do that call again next week, what would you do differently?
Right.
Now, I think that's probably been the mantra that has stuck with me. What would that be? 30 years, easy.
Wow, yeah.
And it just really resonated with me. And I still, every training course, I ask people at the end of the day, what's your MLD? I talk about it throughout the day. And at the end of the course, even myself, you can use it to coach by asking, you can use it to give feedback, tell people what you want them to do more or less of. And you can also use it to self-evaluate. What did I do well there? I need to do more of that. What did I do less? So I did my MLD fairly early on last year. And I thought, I'm not getting back into the training workshops. I need to create some online courses. So that's what I've spent really the last year doing, creating online courses for sales and customer service. Yeah, so.
For people who are obviously interested in all of this, Stuart, where can they find out more about you?
My website, everything's on the website. All the links are on my website. Although I call myself Stuart Harris, the tartan trainer, because I'm always wearing something tartan.
Right.
I went to get my website, stuartharris.com, that is owned by a photographer in America, and stuartharris.co.uk that's owned by a tree surgeon in Cambridge or something like that. And I plumped for thestuartharris.com.
The Stuart,
So,
Stuart.
Stuart, thestuartharris.com, and all the stuff are there. If you there's one of these horrible contact forms at the back. You know, fill it in and I'll get back to you. Better still, pick the phone up and give me a call. I love to chat. I will let them chat for a bit, but yeah, if they want to give us a call, my number is 07708 640 876. That's 07708 640 876.
With the 20 seconds we've left, have you a last singular message you could leave our audience to inspire and motivate them?
Ask yourself the question, what's your MLD on a daily basis or at least a weekly basis? What could you do more of? What could you do less of? And what could you do differently if you had to do it again?
Well, I think that's a great message to finish on. Thanks very much to the Tartan trainer, Stuart Harris.